Hey, good morning and good day to everybody who's listening to this podcast. So we're really fortunate today. A couple of weeks ago, the General Services Administration released the Federal RPA Community of Practice document called the State of Federal RPA. And this document has a kind of a lineage from back to the President's decision memorandum, where he called for, and the administration was looking for what they called CAP 6 goals, where agencies were going to use technology to move low value work. Low value is a really bad term. Let's call it necessary, mundane, repetitive work. And they needed to put federal employees doing more high valued work. And subsequent to that document, the 1823 memorandum from the Office of Management and Budget came out, really directing the use of RPA and other intelligent automation to drive CAP 6 goals. And the community of practice that started about a year ago, a little over a year ago, under Ed Burrows when he was at GSA for the CFO at the GSA, has really taken off. A large amount of people are attending their monthly meetings now. They're doing great leadership activities and sharing information and this type of thing. But the capstone over the last 2 years in documents, if you read it, is this State of the Federal RPA. And we're really lucky today to have the team from MSI that collected and did the analysis and helped put this document together. I'm really excited that we have Nick Surkamp with us today and Andrew Stegmeyer. And what I do, guys, let me ask each of you to introduce yourselves real quick, and then we'll get into the details of the State of the Federal RPA document.
Yeah, I can go first. Andy Stegmeyer, as Jim said, thanks for having us today, Jim. I'm a vice president at MSI. I have about a decade or a little over of experience doing process optimization across the federal government. And at MSI, we only do a couple of things. We only do process automation, process improvement, and some classic transformation work. So we were very excited to be involved in this, and we hope to be able to share out some good lessons learned today.
Nice.
Thanks, Andy. And I'm Nick Surkamp, the Director of Digital Transformation at MSI. I've got 5 years of experience leading technology efforts in civilian and in the DoD sector. I've had significant experience leading the GSA RPA program over the past 2 years, helping with development, security approvals, RPA design and deployment, and obviously some program management initiatives as well. So.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. This came out, like I said, just a week ago, and it's just really chock full of a lot of great information. 2020, crazy, chaotic year. You name the topic, and it's been crazy and chaotic. But the one thing that we've seen throughout the year are federal agencies, state and local governments that are really seeing the value and using robotic process automation and other intelligent automations like AI and machine learning to start getting out from the backlog of work that they have. And they're starting, because this has gone so long now, almost 9 months, 10 months of this, they're really realizing that this is a solution that they've been looking for to get the robotics out of their people, put it back on their computers. So let me start with, what is this federal State of RPA report? Why do you think it was created, and what's the intended purpose?
Yeah, I can take that one, Jim. So I guess I have to start with what I hope won't be the most interesting part of our discussion, which is the sort of the legal disclaimer. Got to get it out of the way, though. Because of the NDAs we've signed as part of putting this together, we can't talk about today any of the individual programs that we talked to or any of the vendor solutions. I know, Jim, you're quite sly, so you'll probably get me to say something that'll have to be on the cutting room floor. But so those are just our sort of legal disclaimers and ground rules. But to your question, which is a good one, is what is this document and why should people read it? So it covers 3 areas. So what degree of success has RPA achieved government-wide? Where are people using it? How often are they using it, and for what? How impactful has RPA been government-wide? What is it driving in terms of business challenge solutions? What are the metrics? And then what are the key approaches? That's part 3. So what approaches are working the best to drive the fastest adoption of RPA? So the report covers all 3, and we can, I'm sure we'll talk in more detail about that, but it includes 23 federal RPA programs. And so we've really got a broad swath of expertise, experience, and knowledge in the report.
Perfect. Yeah, and we won't have to have anything on the cutting room floor. This is going to be a great thought leadership thing. I think it's really going to help people who are trying to understand use this best. So we're going to be good there.
Yeah.
What was the methodology behind it? So you said there's 23 agencies. I know from the Federal Robotics Consortium that's still out and operational. I know our count is around 79 agencies using RPA. How did you select who was going to be a part of this? And how did they really fit into what was the maturity model, which I'd really like to make sure you talk about that RPA maturity matrix, because that is something you don't see in the private sector.
Yeah, so we started with just a brief survey to all of the groups that we knew had either thought about RPA or were actively engaged in an RPA program. And so from that, we were able to ascertain a couple things. And then we were able to get to the final number of 23 programs that we interviewed. So we asked them, have you made demonstrable progress in implementing RPA? The classic, are you willing to talk to us question. So obviously we were glad that 23 people or 23 programs said yes. And then we also asked, do you have standard metrics around this? So one of the goals of the report was to be able to come up with some government-wide statements of impact. And so that required programs to have collected at least some basic information. So we got 23 organizations to participate across the government, a good swath of defense versus non-defense. And then, so what we did was through the Federal RPA COP, and the leadership of that group was develop a basic maturity matrix that measures a couple of things. And so the goal being to really understand how mature the RPA program is and what that capability is now and where it's headed in the future. And also we were able to collect in most cases where it was a year ago. So it's a good before and after story with some good data-driven conclusions. And so the maturity matrix covers a couple of areas. So it looks at number of applications deployed. It looks at total annualized savings created by the applications. So that would be an annualized hours savings number. The strength of the program's process improvement capability. So not only are you creating bots, but are you re-engineering processes so that the bots are leveraged in the best way possible. So also the scope of the program's impact. And so just clearly stated what that means is, are they doing automations at the office level? Are they doing them at the agency level? How impactful is that RPA program? Another area of the maturity matrix is the strength of the program's pipeline. So obviously that's probably the best measure of future demand, is the strength of the pipeline for the program. Also looked at the robustness of the technological capabilities. What sort of growth would they promote in the future? And then the breadth of the program's security and privacy controls. And then one we added at the last minute was the program's degree of success in implementing AI, IA, more advanced automation solutions. And so we can talk about some of the findings in all of those areas, but it really was a comprehensive look at 9 or 10 facets of an RPA program in the report.
So let me ask you this. Are you equating a maturity matrix with bureaucracy? Or is the maturity matrix going to really suggest to them how to continue to be agile and develop quicker and get value? You used the word impact a couple of times. Is matrix and bureaucracy the same?
Yeah, Jim, I hope very much that those two aren't equated in this report. So the way the maturity matrix was designed is that there's weights on each of the factors that I mentioned. And the factors that are most heavily weighted are the number of automations deployed and then also the annualized savings hours. So what's really being sort of promoted and hopefully facilitated through both this and all of the other things that the federal RPA COP does is getting to those results. So I think the maturity matrix also, to your point, addresses some of those challenges or hurdles most often associated with bureaucracy. So, for a COE, it's, how do you manage all of your technology? How do you manage all the approvals that you need? That's baked into the maturity matrix, but those are really sort of, hurdles to overcome and things to get done. And I think the COPs put out a lot of good guidance in those areas. It's how do you get past those things and then move to the results. So this is a very results oriented report and hopefully pushing that way in the future. Perfect.
So look, when you get to the position that you guys are in, where you get to watch all this form up, what's the interesting thing, right? We've seen RPA grow as a result of 2020, right? But what's making it interesting? What are some of the cross-government trends that you're seeing as you build this report?
Yeah, so I can talk to some, at the program level and at the federal level, some interesting findings, and then maybe Nick, you can take on some of the technology sort of related findings. So that's sort of the high level programmatic when you're looking at the impact. I think what we really saw in the report is that in FY20, RPA really hit its stride. So I'm a big fan of the show Shark Tank, and a lot of the entrepreneurs that go on the show, they talk about how they were able to turn their hobbies into successful businesses. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what's occurred with RPA. So, at the beginning of FY20, there were a few big programs, but most people were sort of, either kicking the tires or, it was a hobby that a few folks at the agency were involved in and wanted to get started. And I think in FY20, you saw over the course of the year that they became, if you will, successful businesses in the sense that, multiple automations deployed, more impactful automations deployed. So in terms of numbers, I have a few. There was a 110% increase in the automations deployed in FY20. There was a 195% increase in the annual hours saved. So, I mean, right there, that tells you that roughly, on average, about 1,300 hours per automation before FY20, it's now up to 1,700. So when programs are going out and automating things now, they're taking on bigger business challenges and more impactful solutions. Another sort of broad trend that I think is very interesting is that most programs have now added on complementary services that involve process improvement, process mapping, standard design documentation, a lot of other improvement tools. Almost a third of the programs we talked to have even added like process re-engineering, metric definition services. So RPA is being incorporated as a solution, a broad scale solution, not just, an interesting technology that can, transition from low or mundane, as you said, work to high value services. And then the other thing I would add is that we're also seeing a lot of programs that are now operating at an agency level or a COE level versus maybe an office level or, maybe a division level program. And so I think as taxpayers, we should all be excited that the government's doing a better job leveraging economies of scale, instituting, agency-wide programs versus very small office programs. And that's also helping, boost results. And I think you see that also in the number for how many hours these bots are saving on average. Nick, is there anything you wanted to add in terms of like the technology side of this?
So yeah, so largely the federal government has taken a shift in the sense that agencies aren't deploying it on their desktops anymore. They're looking to make this a broader digital transformation initiative across the agency. So agencies are not only getting up to speed on what RPA can do, but they're deploying it across the enterprise at a scale that'll be truly impactful in federal government. I know Andy said there was 195% increase in the hours per automation that's being deployed, but Just out of the 23 programs that were looked at, I think, Andy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there was more than 500,000 hours of workload reduction across those 23 agencies. So if you wanted to put a dollar value to that, I mean, roughly what, $70 per hour? Andy, your math is better than mine. 500,000 times $70 per hour is a significant chunk of change across federal government.
I was just going to let you struggle. It's 35 million, but yeah.
$35 million of capacity that's been created in the federal government. So that's just in the programs that were looked at. So if you can imagine that and how this can multiply over time, this is truly a workforce multiplier, and it is a digital transformation initiative that can really, really change how the federal government operates.
Yeah, I spent 32 years in the government, and this federal COP is not only allowing $35 million to be done, but it's doing it in a way that's going to rapidly accelerate it through the rest of the federal government. You were talking about enterprise scales and that we've got this robot for every person idea that just like you have Microsoft Word on your desktop, you'll have a robot and you'll be able to change things. But this isn't that you're building your bots. This is that you're using that digital intern to assist you in doing your job faster and quicker and better so that you can get to the veteran at the hospital. At USDA, you can talk to the person that's doing an agricultural activity and out from behind your screen. So it's really interesting to hear that. It does sound like that enterprise-wide RPA is where they're going to be going over next year. The process mining stuff is, when I saw that last year, we introduced it as part of our platform, and the ability for a CIO to put process mining on his infrastructure and to see where the data is clogging up. Yeah, that's a whole lot better than listening to the greasy wheel squeaking there saying, I need some work done for me, when the facts are, you got to fix another place to open up the pipe. So there's just a tremendous amount of stuff. Exciting that you guys get to see it, but really excited that this federal COP community is sharing this stuff at the speed at which they're sharing it.
Jim, I mean, I'll even touch a little bit more. I mean, one of the larger agencies that we looked at, you talk about a robot for every person. I think that they had implemented about 15 hours of workload reduction per year per employee. So across the enterprise, they service the entire enterprise, but they had divided it out to 15 hours per employee of time saved. I know in the grand scheme of it, that doesn't seem like a lot. 15 hours, that's 2 days of work. But as the programs scale, 15 hours will become 40 hours, and 40 hours will become 80. And then all of a sudden, you have this added capacity that you could really, really do something across government and really make a change for the good. So just wanted to point that out as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, even if you look at your Department of Defense and your combat readiness, what if every soldier has 2 extra days a year to train? And that's the difference between them having a life-threatening injury and taking their mission and accomplishing that. And so it's 2 days today, like you said, it's a week later, but nurses with 2 extra days see more patients. IRS agents that are processing returns, get my returns to us faster, that type of thing. And so giving people time to look at their job and do their job and get away from that mundane is perfect. So we have said good stuff about government, right? And that's always good. But where's the government still behind? Based on the things that you've been looking at, where could they improve their current RPA capabilities that would really set them up and establish to drive them into that large intelligent automation area?
Yeah, so when looking at it, there were 2 areas where we would say that the government was behind, and there was one area that we would really say that individual agencies are behind. So looking at it as a whole, we thought the federal government, what we saw was there's still a lack of guidance around how to deploy and govern RPA. So for example, federal agencies are still left up to their own devices to interpret NIST and FIPS guidance for creating, deploying, and governing robotic process automation. It's leaving the individual agencies up to set their own guidelines on how to approve the individual automation. So when looking at this, you would see some agencies take a very lenient approach. You weren't requiring system owner approval. You were able to download it on the desktop. So the governance was very light and it was very easy to deploy. Meanwhile, you had other agencies where it was very complex. You would have to get multiple system owner approvals to sign off on these. You're doing privacy threshold analysis for each automation that was being deployed, as well as a number of other hurdles just to deploy individual automation. We think one of the areas that the federal government could step up and help to streamline the deployment of RPA is to come up with a standard way to interpret some of that federal policy, maybe a checklist, if you will, of documents that could be needed that could satisfy a federal agency to go out and deploy it, opposed to having each agency battle this on their own. Agencies are doing it, and they're doing it effectively, and they're doing it well, but the lack of consistency has not caused a significant hurdle, but it has delayed the adoption of some of these emerging technologies, not just RPA, in the federal workforce. The second area that we really saw that agencies were just getting started with, I'm not going to say they're struggling with, was everyone's moving towards that enterprise platform, but how do you utilize it? How do you credential unattended automation? Establishing a process for non-person entities. Like how does an agency look at this new classification of worker and how do they add it to the agency's Active Directory? How do they grant the credentials? How do they manage them? And we've seen that agencies are out on their own trying to establish, how do we do this? So similarly to the first point, if the federal government gave some sort of standard guidance on how to look at this new class of digital worker, the NPEs, how could we manage them? How do we grant them? And then how do we continually monitor the non-person entities? That would go a long ways towards deploying unattended automation at scale at these agencies. And similarly to the first point, agencies are figuring it out on their own. But however, the COP is there to help. There's other working groups that are there to help agencies that are just getting started. But if there were that federal guidance around how do you do this, quickly and effectively, I think it would really help RPA to take off even to another level. And then the last area at the individual agency level, we would say that RPA programs are still having limited success in incorporating intelligent automation into their workflow. From talking to these programs and from seeing how it's been deployed, I mean, it's easy to say that agencies were prioritizing RPA and how do we get this done and how do we get this done fast and at scale and across the agency, that intelligent automation was just a little bit on the back burner. I think as we go into the next year, you'll see chatbots, you'll see a variety of sensory tools and that OCR technology and incorporating that into the workflows, or machine learning. It'll all start to come together and be incorporated in the workflow, but it is still an area that's just now taking off. And we've seen, agencies just now getting into that.
Sounds good. Yeah, our AI fabric is really poised to help support that, much like our process mining. So I'm interested in seeing how we help agencies crack that nut over the year. I would a quick yes or no from you guys. Having been in government as long as I was in government, I always heard about how the private sector was so far out and ahead. I would contend, based on what we're seeing with at least our 79 clients and some others out there, that the federal government may not be on the bleeding end of the spear, as they say in DOD, but they're certainly on the edge of the spear when it comes to agencies being willing to look at and adopt not only RPA, but that other digital labor. Do you see that anywhere in your reporting?
Well, I'm going to say, maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I don't think the federal government is behind private sector in deploying RPA. Some of the larger agencies are adopted about the same time and have scaled their programs to service enterprises of 50,000 people. And they're doing it at speed, and they're doing it in a way that is really truly benefiting not only the agency but the American people. RPA has truly taken off in the federal government, and it's the ROI the agencies are seeing is truly remarkable, not only for the agency but for the American public as well. So yeah, Andy.
Nick, Jim said yes or no.
Sorry,
That,
I know.
that was about 400 extra words. But no, Jim, so I have a somewhat funny story that's relevant. It's not like laugh out loud funny, but it's more of like, oh, that's something funny. So we actually set up a meeting with one of the larger RPA programs that we support with a very large financial institution in order for the financial institution to come teach some RPA best practices and lessons to the federal government client. About 10 minutes into the meeting, it became very clear that the federal government client was way out in front of a very large financial institution, and that I had just completely wasted everyone in the meeting's time. So I think, as you suggested, that there are a lot of examples of the federal government actually being out in front on RPA and adopting it at a greater scale than you would normally sort of expect for, an innovative technology.
Interesting. Yeah. So my gauge this year has been watching folks like the USDA. So for those of you listening, if you haven't looked at it, if you go to USDA.gov/RPA, they have their whole program out, public-facing website, talking about how it's doing. Interviews with Forest Service, interviews with the Army Air Force Exchange Service. And we read their article. They hope to save $1 million with RPA this year. When they got to $8 million, they realized that, much like Andrew, you just said, you had set up a meeting that was a mistake. They realized that they weren't adopting fast enough. And they changed their whole plan for the adoption of RPA because they're essentially the Target and the Safeway grocery store for the Department of Defense. Saving $8 million meant that retirees, the active duty soldiers deployed, all would benefit. And it was an 8x return on what they wanted. It was a 20x return on what they invested. And so agency after agency is constantly out reporting their good numbers. GSA often reports, and not saving an hour or two, not saving 15 hours for 3 people in a small section, but to your point, 15 hours spread across an entire agency. And as all the other agencies start to do that and start to really digitize their work, they're going to be able to reimagine the way they can accomplish their mission in ways that they've just never been able to do. So I see them like you do, Andy. I think they're up to, in many cases, ahead of where private sector is. But it's just a great testament to the back page of this report has about 30 different people listed. And we at UiPath know a lot of those, but it's just a testament to their volunteer service to be on this, helping other agencies accelerate, share information freely between them in a way that you don't normally see in the private sector because of competition. So interesting. Thanks for that comment. How do agencies pick up this report? I think it's around 20 something pages. How do they pick this up and use it, Andy, if they don't have a program? And how do the ones that have a program pick it up and use it?
Yeah, so I would say 2 things. And it's, as Jim said, it's only 20 pages. It's a very fast read. Maybe it's a holiday read. So I would say two ways they can use it. So the first way I would say is to look at the RPA program showcases, which make up the latter half of the report. So what are in those? It's a deep dive into the 5 largest or most mature, using the maturity matrix, RPA programs in government. And it really looks at, what was the path they took to become, a mature RPA program. So I think one of the findings in the report is there's many ways to get there. There's many ways to get to the destination, but along the way, there's some decisions that are made. And so I guess just in terms of commonalities among those big 5 programs, couple of things I'd mention. So all programs had significant executive buy-in. I think as we all know, there's like dozens of ways that you can lose steam or momentum on initiatives like this, but with executive buy-in and very active executive buy-in, you can usually overcome those hurdles pretty quickly. All 5 of those agencies also deploy a COE model. So they're taking on big projects, and they've probably got a lot of buy-in among customers and stakeholders for the program as well, because they're providing, solutions not just to their individual office, but across the agency. Another commonality is that they all have process improvement capabilities that are pretty strong. So again, they're using RPA, but they're using it effectively. And then the other thing I'd mention is they all have some pretty robust program management tools in terms of, how are we monitoring investments? How are we understanding the program goals? How are we reporting it out? So I think those are all commonalities that are interesting because they give people who are just starting out some idea of what they're in for and, how they can plan that out over the course of the RPA journey. The second area I would say that is of interest to, either emerging or completely new pilot programs is around how do you prioritize all of this sort of stuff that I just mentioned. And so there's roughly two schools of thought for that area. So one of them says, you go out and you get some experience doing RPA first, you get some bots under your belts that are working, they drive program momentum, they drive executive buy-in because they say, oh, this wasn't a fool's errand. We actually got some impact out of these things. And so that's one approach. And then the second approach is, you do the full build out of your platform, you build what you think you'll need right up front. And I think there's a lot of pros and cons to both of those approaches. And so I think the programs that are just starting out really need to think about, what is the forecasted future demand? What are the requirements for the program? What is the usual environment for getting innovative technology through the door? And then each agency will have to make a decision on which approach they'd like to use. So I think Nick and I have worked with, groups that have used either approach, and they both seem to get there. One gets results a little quicker. The other one, is a more of a long-term play where you can start right away doing really complex bots and, more impactful automation. So it's really an individual agency choice. But I think what this report can do is show a couple of each, how they made those decisions, and sort of where that's gotten them. So I think those are the two things I would point out, that would be most helpful for emerging or new RPA programs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I know both of the agencies, or at least two of the agencies, that have done just the opposite, right? Build our COE and then build bots, and build bots and build our COE. The only thing I guess the reason why I lean towards the build some bots and your COE as you go is you start to see value from your efforts right away, right? And when those two agencies started, I don't think there was anybody for them to look at in front of them and say, okay, there's risk or no risk. Today, you can look across at least 23 that you guys surveyed and say, look, there's really no risk. You don't need to put your toe in the water. The lifeguard blew the whistle. Everybody can swim. It's warm and it's clear. Now, you can swim as much or as little as you want to, but you don't have to ask, is it okay to swim? And so I just, getting started always seems to be a hard thing to do. And because agencies have gotten started in RPA, AI, machine learning, chatbots, instead of letting them all start off as little weeds and grow and then try to pull them back together into a flower bed, you can really start now with a great degree of confidence that there's not this massive risk. We've not yet seen an Arnold Schwarzenegger bot take over an agency and completely disrupt it. All of the bots so far continue to do what they're told to do. So speaking of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the future, let's look at 2021, because it's close to December, and this will come out the 1st of December. You've got to have your 2021 predictions. Where do you guys see RPA and the federal COP going and growing in 2021?
I can predict that there will not be an Arnold Schwarzenegger bot in FY21. Hopefully, I think we can continue that, Jim. But I think two things on the sort of program side of the house. I think you're going to see a lot more people, as you suggested, Jim, sort of get off the bench and jump into the game of RPA. As you suggested, it's now more of a data-driven decision. They've seen at least 23, if not more, probably more than that, get in there, get results. And now, it's a data-driven point. It's a benchmark. There's one available. You can see the ROIs for all the programs if you ask. And you can see that, with the different approaches, what has happened. There's now a lot of good literature coming out of the Federal RPA COP about, I would point to the original playbook that the COP produced as a good source of information. It's everything in there is proven also from all of the RPA programs. And it's a much more comprehensive, I think, view of how to get started. So in terms of what we'll see in the future, I think you'll see a lot more RPA programs, hopefully operating more at the agency level than the, duplicated at the office level. But, and then I think you'll also see the programs that exist scaling much faster. And I think the RPA COP will play a big role in that in terms of, offering mentoring programs, connecting people, and really getting to results faster. And that was another point to your question about industry. I think government's doing a uniquely good job of collaborating across, what can often be very stovepiped agencies, and getting at broad scale solutions. And that's something that within, individual companies, that we work with or see that, you don't see that sort of one approach. There is some replication there. So those are the two things I would think: more people doing it, and the people who are already doing it getting results faster.
How do I follow that? Jeez.
Can't.
Yeah. So, and that those are great points, government-wide level. So at the individual agency level, though, you're going to have to expect the agencies that have adopted RPA to get more into that intelligent automation game. To start deploying chatbots, to start deploying machine learning in their automation workflows, or those more advanced OCR tools. And then at the same time, you're going to have to expect the programs that are just getting started to continue to grow, to start servicing the entire agency, to take a customer-centric approach to how they're doing business. It's not the traditional, we go to the IT shop and we ask for this automation to be built. Automation programs that we've seen are out there actively recruiting new customers within their agency, and they're taking that private sector customer-centric approach to how they deliver and how they manage their bots. So I genuinely feel that you'll see more agencies take that sort of approach where, hey, we want to get this done, we want to help your job get better, and we're going to service the entire agency, and this is how our program is going to make federal government and X agency as efficient as possible.
Interesting, Nick. Hey, Nick, tell me and talk to me real quick about what you see when you're out there talking to government employees with respect to their pushback. I mean, my experience at NASA when we were doing the robotics was once people understood what it was, they actually wanted more of it. We had a great example when DISA CFO office demoed their first bot. They had 35 grown adults in a room clapping because it was work in mundane and tedious. It's absolutely necessary, but they realized it wasn't necessary for them to do it. Are you seeing an acceptance of automation by the government folks that you're talking to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a practitioner, boots on the ground, I can tell you firsthand that when you first go to an individual and say, I want to automate a part of your job, the first thing they say is, I don't have time for it. So there's this funny meme, I guess you could say, of a man walking a barrel with square wheels, and then someone going up to him and saying, hey, I have some round wheels, why don't you use these instead? He said, I don't have time for that, I have to get to where I'm going. So RPA is very much the same way, and individuals don't understand it until they see it. They'll say, oh, I don't have time to sit down with you and show you what I'm doing. I have to do what I'm doing. I have to deliver on my mission. But once they kind of break that mindset and they see, oh, I can only do this 3 times per day. If I had a bot doing this, I could do it 100 times per day. The long-term investment in my time today is well worth what I'm going to get back from RPA. So as agencies and as individuals start to get that acceptance, it's only going to grow and grow and grow, and the impact's only going to grow and grow and grow. So the more people that see it, that understand it, that interact with it, the more ideas that are generated, and it's just momentum after momentum. It just continues to grow as people start to understand it.
Andy, you seen the same thing?
Yeah, I would add that we have a data point. One of the clients we're working with adopted sort of a slogan of automation first. And every time, there's a problem, at least consider automation as part of your solution toolkit. And they're one of the, biggest RPA programs in government. And during the same time, their federal employee viewpoint survey scores went through the roof, 20% increases. I did not do a statistical analysis. This could be, the classic correlation versus causality. But it's very telling that when you incorporate RPA as part of your transformation toolkit, that it does drive staff engagement, and there is a logical connection there. If you're doing the same mundane task every day, and then someone comes along and says, we're going to have your computer take care of that for you. We're going to have RPA take care of it. I mean, that is a clear driver of positive engagement within an agency. So I'm actually seeing the same thing that sort of Nick is describing, that RPA is a driver of engagement, although there are some initial conversations that can be awkward. But once people know what you're sort of proposing to them, I have not seen anyone yet say, no, let's not do that.
That automation first mindset is a fun one to talk about. I mean, I had to go to the DMV yesterday and get my new real ID. And not that RPA is taking anybody's jobs away, but I was thinking during the entire process, like, how much of this could be automated? How much of these interactions could be automated? How could we shift these individuals to that higher value work? And the entire time I'm in the line, I'm thinking, man, RPA would be perfect for the DMV. How do we get in here? So I know that's it's a little bit far-fetched, but yeah, that automation first mindset is absolutely critical to, helping this to continue to scale and grow.
Nick, that may have been the most cliche complaint ever, that the DMV could use additional automation.
Yeah, well, hey, look, I couldn't agree with you more. The DMV out in California started using UiPath during the pandemic. They've already gotten a national level award for their use of RPA and UiPath. And automation first is what we're all about. So couldn't agree with you more. So I'm going to give you my predictions for 2021. But before I do, closing questions I'm going to have gives you time to anonymize your answer. I'd like to know, because so far we've been talking about programs, what's the most interesting bot that you've seen develop and why? And figure out, while I'm talking, how you can anonymize that in the back of your head so you're not giving away an agency. But it's important that people appreciate what the bots are doing in addition to the value of having a program. So my prediction is that major areas like call centers, fraud, waste, and abuse, document processing for applications for unemployment insurance, and SBA loans and PPP loans, all those kind of things, are all going to get into the automation mindset this year. Something as simple as, and people don't really appreciate how simple it is, the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. 5,000 government employees are employed to help anonymize data that can be released to the general public, right? And the amount of work, the backlog that they have, in every agency has required Congress to require agencies to give a plan for how to clear that backlog. And yet there are agencies today that are prototyping UiPath solutions for you to get the bots to do the heavy lifting, go through the article or go through the document or read through the email and black out everything that needs to be blacked out, so that a person is reviewing that. You're not just going to trust that it works right away, but you don't have two people reviewing every document and then sending it for legal review. Or something as important as 508 compliance. So 508 compliance revolves around the idea that documents need to be readable by people that have reading, hearing, visual issues, and they need to be able to participate in the government fully also. And I just looked at a 508 compliance bot the other day, actually briefed it to what's called the Access Board, which is the governing body in the government for the rules for 508, and they were amazed. Right? No government employee wants to take forever to answer a FOIA request, nor do they want to take forever for a freedom. They don't want to not put a document out that can be read by people that have a disability, and therefore need that document to have the right colors or to have the right comments or to have an audio version of it and all of that type of stuff. So I think 2021 is really going to be the year when not only do we explode the programs, but we explode what they're developing. And that the product that they're developing has much more impact than people realize today, that makes government truly start to be that digital government that you don't sit in line going, why aren't they automated? Why isn't the DMV scanning my old driver's license and putting me in a queue and sending me to the right person right away? Why am I sitting in a room with 40 people? Why can't I get my reservation for my meeting about 10 minutes in advance, and I'll show up on time and they'll be there and everything will be great? That is where I think that the whole automation revolution, automation era is going to take us in 2021. Given what we've seen over the last 3 years of easing into automation, 2021 is going to be the explosive year for it. So with that, yeah, go ahead.
I have two answers for you. One is the self-serving answer, because it was the first bot that I ever built, which is actually an automation that goes out and searches all the daily news for one of our federal clients that related to the administrator of that agency, to some of the facilities that are owned, and then also, just at the agency level. So it goes out to various news sources and searches for information that's been shared about that agency in the last 24 hours. And then it packages it all up, scans it for certain keywords, and then it's sent to not only the administrator, but I would say 5,000 of the employees, to then, be able to digest the news for that agency over the past day. So that's my self-serving answer. But one of the most impactful automations I've also seen is an automation called the daily check-in automation, which is actually requiring one of our federal clients to check in daily during the pandemic, asking them their status for the day, teleworking, reporting to the job site, or on leave. So this client that we work with, they have hundreds of buildings across federal government. Through this automation, they're able to understand the occupancy levels of their buildings during this pandemic, making sure that there's not too many employees and not too little, in order to remain streamlined and have continuity of their operations. But at the same time, it helps them to understand that their employees are safe and well during this time. If individuals haven't responded to that survey throughout the day, leadership is notified, and if people haven't responded for multiple days, then they're checked in on to make sure that everything's okay. I think the agency has about a 99.8% compliance rate across its more than 10,000 employees. So it's really, really a cool and impactful automation, and it gives leadership a real-time sense and understanding of what their workforce deposition is. And it also helps them to understand their occupancy levels during, a time of crisis and pandemic. So those are my two answers. Andy?
Those are two good ones. I just wanted to stop first and recognize how Jim completely schooled Nick and I in his predictions. His were much more exciting. They were stated much more eloquently. So, hats off to Jim. Those were good. And then in terms of bots, I had two. And I'm a very sort of, so Nick described some complicated automations. I'm just a very simple person. And so I think my favorite one is an HR automation that was developed for a client that they had a tremendous problem around providing status updates to hiring actions. And they were staring down the barrel of, one of those expensive systems changes that cost millions of dollars and take many years in order to get this done. And so RPA enabled that HR office to, within 3 or 4 weeks, come up with an RPA solution to continuously ping existing databases, see when hiring actions move from one stage to another, and then notify the hiring manager. And that saved a significant amount of time for all of the HR experts to actually do their jobs instead of answering phone calls and questions about where is my hiring action in the hiring process. I know that's not the most complex use case, but just watching that process and how impactful it was, I think it was a super cool one. I also had a COVID bot. There's an agency we work with that has a pretty good GIS system monitoring COVID hotspots around the country, done through automation. It pings, reliable, trusted data sources about number of cases, number of deaths related to COVID around the country, packages that up into a nice, dashboard presentation, and provides agency leadership with, immediate knowledge of where their employees are, and then also how that juxtaposes against where the hotspots are. So I think those are two pretty easy, pretty simple automations that are really impactful for the agency leadership.
Nice. So guys, I think that's about to wrap us up. I will say, Andy, you were talking about it being Christmas reading. I would definitely say that or holiday reading, that this is definitely a holiday gift to everybody in the RPA industry. Being able to take these 21 pages or so and really get into them and understand, that the government is not waiting on somebody to tell them what to do. They're out there driving robotic process automation, and by extension, AI and ML. And I mean, the beauty of this is investments that they've already made in AI and ML and chatbots can be tied together. I know that one of the findings in the report said that seamlessness is not quite there. So shameless plug, we'll be glad to help them make it that, but it is going to be there. And we are going to have a better government at the end of 2021 from a digitization perspective than we have now, thanks to the work that I think again, volunteers, all of those people on the back page there that contributed to the data and worked with you guys to get it assembled. All those government employees were volunteering their extra time because they were confident that RPA has value to the federal government. So just real quick, closing comments.
Yeah, I think I would just want to give a few shout outs and kudos, if that's okay. So as you said, there's some people on the back page of this report who are really driving, a lot of progress across government. And we certainly appreciate them being willing to work with the COP and with us to get this report out, to get, a pretty standardized view of what's being accomplished, which I think has been a little bit troublesome heretofore. I would also say a shout out and kudos is due to the RPA COP leadership. Been very aggressive, very progressive in sort of getting this out there, making a lot of progress and then monitoring it. Also kudos to you, Jim. Thank you for inviting us on. I will say though, if you view this as a good Christmas gift, I'm glad I'm not on your Christmas list. It's a very interesting read, but if I saw this in my stocking, I'm not sure I'd be too thankful. But thank you for inviting us on today. It's always great to chat.
Although I do think that last year holiday time, all of the MSI employees did get a copy of the federal RPA playbook. So
that's true. We did give them a copy of the RPA playbook. So maybe Jim, I'm just as bad.
There you go. Good.
Yeah. No.
Closing thoughts?
No, yeah, for me, I would just like the same thing, to thank all the members of the community of practice. I think they're up to 1,200 members of federal RPA practitioners, and that number is only going to grow. And RPA is only going to the edge, and helping agencies to see this value has been incredible, and we just look forward to continuing helping that growth.
Yeah, I remember just a little over a year ago, Ed Burrows and Jennifer Hill now at Treasury, we're talking about the CFO had asked them to get this forum started, and they just over the summer got it running up and moving, and the value that it's contributing to the government. People who aren't in government may not appreciate it, but when you try to get agencies to communicate with each other and share, not that they don't want to, it's just harder than you think. And so the results of this report are certainly suggesting that a lot of people have figured out a way to communicate and collaborate, and government's going to be better as a result of it. So with that, I appreciate you guys being on today. Hope that you have a great holiday season. And like everybody else in the world, I'm hoping that the ball drop on 2020 is a really good 2020-21.
Yep.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jim.